Okay, welcome. Let's try that again. Every week we seem to have a little bit of issues. Maybe I'm pressing the wrong buttons. I don't know. So welcome once again to this week's Earth Hour. As I said, we're speaking to Dr. Jason Fyfer from Bodyworks. He is a chiropractor. I've been seeing him for many years, and he is like our general practitioner. He's the person that we go to, that we go see no matter what's wrong, not just for adjustments. Okay, so I'm going to try and get him on again. Okay, so while we're waiting for Dr. Jason, just a reminder to go and check out our website, Yoga Summit on the 21st of June. It seems we are getting Jason online. It's still spinning. We also have a workshop with Usi on the 27th of June, which will be about yin and somatics. It's like a crash introduction course, ideal for beginners, for people with trauma, suffered from PTSD. So go and check that out on our website, earthyogastudio.co.za. Jason is still spinning, so I'm sure he is going to join any moment. You see, I keep pressing the wrong button. Are you there? Hi.
I'm there. I can see on my screen. My screen is a bit teased. I can't see myself moving around on my screen. That's the only thing.
That's very strange. I'm just trying to put in the comments your. Oh, do you mind doing that? Because I'm not too sure if I'm typing it incorrectly. So just in the bottom of the comments, do you mind just putting in your handle to Bodyworks,
Sure.
so if people are looking for you so that they can find you and I can pin it?
Yeah, not a problem. I'll do that now.
Why we can't see you? Okay, so how will I then pin that? I don't know, Instagram Live seems to be a little bit finicky and a little bit funny. It's still spinning by me, so I'm hoping that at some point you're gonna come on. I know that one time when I tried to join someone else live, I had to do it from another phone because it didn't actually allow it from my phone. Do you have what phone do you have? Jason, are you still there? Hi, yes, I can hear you. What phone do you have? Yeah, you see, there's something wrong with them. They don't go live. We won't be able to see you for some reason. I don't know why that is. Should we just carry on? Okay. Yeah, I'll just imagine seeing your face there. So thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule and meeting with us. Oh, they say that they can't hear us. Do you mean you can't hear me? Can't hear you? Oh, they say they can't hear. Can you maybe dial in from another phone? Okay, even if it's from her profile, we'll just pin Bodywork. Okay, thank you. So I'm just gonna remove him. Okay, so he's gonna try and dial in from another phone. He's also got the Hawaii. Never buy a phone if you don't know how to pronounce the name properly. Okay, so if you guys can think so long, so I see a lot of yogis on here. So I was specifically thinking about yoga injuries, like things that happen in our yoga practice that we tend to injure often. If there were any questions related to that, if you could type that down below, and then I can ask Jason specifically those questions. Okay, here is Jason now. And now. Oops. That's so bizarre. What's happening, you guys? Oh, here, let's try this way. Yes, that's what I would like.
Hello.
Hey!
It's great when you fast. It tends to work better.
Yes, yeah. How are you?
I'm good, thanks, and you?
Good, good. Thank you. Thank you so much once again for taking time out of your busy schedule and meeting with us.
Not a problem at all, Izzy.
Okay, so I've talked a lot, so I'm going to hand over to you. Please tell us who you are, how you've gotten to this point, why chiropractor, and what is a chiropractor? That's lots of questions. You can take a full hour to answer just those.
Cool. Thanks, yourself. Thank you for your kind words, and it's always great to hear that we can make a difference in your family's health and expressing movement. That's kind of what it is that we do. Obviously, we're down the road from you guys in Sunny Hill. We're Bodyworks Chiros. I was very fortunate that I had no clue what the hell I was going to do after school. And I went and did, you know, you do those psychometric tests at like 7 or 8 level. And they kind of said, go in some kind of path like this. And I really wasn't interested in doing medicine. I wasn't interested in doing physio or any other rest of it. And I had no clue what a chiro was. And I had two matrics that had done chiro. And I thought, oh, cool, you become a doctor. So a little bit of egotistical, let's go and do that. And for the first 3 years, I had no clue what the hell I was still doing as a chiropractor. And as you go through the years, I kind of landed on the button. I started working with sports teams and did a few things like that. And I found a profession from the start that just resonated with me, where we can take what your innate ability is to do and allow itself to work better, and we can help try and enhance that and allow for better movement. And that's kind of what got me to dealing with sports and then dealing with the family practice. And that's, I was lucky that I could stand for 15 years now doing something I love right from the get-go. And then the chiro side of that, which is often something that doesn't get explained that well, really truthfully is just about looking at enhancing your body's natural innate ability to heal. So we see the spinal skeletal structure, and we use that as an interface to try and upregulate the brain, particularly the brain. It's not so much that the chassis has to be out or the mechanical system has to be stiff or irritated or anything like that, but if that brain, top down, bottom out, isn't allowed to express its full capacity, you start to pick up dis-ease. And when that becomes dis-ease or dysfunction in terms of your mobility, we want to try and look for areas of strain and load or lack of communication and try and restore that as much as possible. There's a couple of ways of doing it. The adjustment is one way of doing it. There's a couple other variations of doing it, but ultimately it's about making sure that we allow for that brain to express its full potential for health, and it can repair itself. We're not doing any of the work. We're allowing you to do the work that your body needs to be able to do to move itself forward and allow itself to do its job.
And that's like getting to the root of the problem. It's dealing with the issue itself, even if we don't know what the issue is, right? It's not like giving a pill and treat the symptom.
So, bit of a philosophical soapbox, but I mean, our modern day environment is so much about boxing things in and having this little label and going, right, we need to deal with this little label, as opposed to taking a step back, looking at it as a system, as a holistic system. I mean, it's an ecosystem. You change one thing in the ecosystem, it's going to have an impact on the rest of it. And we've got so far beyond this idea of, you know, we take a small tablet or we do something and it's going to make everything better, but we haven't really addressed multiple parts of that system. So if we can step back and not necessarily going, oh, we need to treat this only, we can make the system work better. We allow it to start on its own, tolerating and managing its environmental stresses better. And I think what tends to happen is that we get so focused on, oh, I'm sore, or I have a disease symptom, that we see it as that only. But that's there for your body to tell you something's wrong, something's not right within your environment. Change it. The joke that I use with everyone is, if you get stuck on an iceberg, you're going to get hypothermia. You start getting cold, you start shivering. That hypothermia is an intelligent response to from your body telling you, get me off the iceberg, otherwise I'm going to freeze to death. and you will expire. So if you didn't get that pain response or those shivers, you would not be able to move yourself out of that environment and get yourself healthier.
Yeah, brilliant. Brilliant. So how much of our mind and the way that we think plays a role in what's happening in our body? And how does that work? And please explain it simply.
Realistically, if I look at what we see in general practice, probably about 80% of what we see, and when I say it's environment, that's your headspace, that's how you interact with people at work, that's how you interact in your drive to work. It's from that constant bombardment of that in your environmental time. So it starts with the head. And I think what tends to happen is in modern day environments, we still see our brain disconnected from our body. And we talk about our body, we talk about our brain as being two totally separate things, when we're the same thing. We're designed to move to exactly. Your gut is your small brain. You have neural cells in your heart. It's just an extension. Your body is an extension of your brain. And if we look at evolutionary processes, we're designed to go out and move so we can pull things off the tree to eat it to feed our brain. That's why we have the ambulation like we do. So probably a large part of what we see or people complain about in their life is emotionally and environmentally related. And I'll always bring it back to stress is a word we tend to use quite negatively. In the way I'll typically use it is stress is it's an irritation to the system, be it chemical stress, be it environmental stress or physical stress, or emotional stress. And what tends to happen is, and the emotional side of it is something we can't get away from. So we tend to then be in our heads a lot more than we are necessarily in front of the computer. And that drives a response to keep us healthy. So in a nutshell, you leave work, you're out of this kind of closed-in type physical stressor, you get in your car, and now you must deal in your head with all the work stuff, all the family stuff, all the other stuff that's going on around you. And our brain doesn't discern the difference that it's physically happening in our head versus physiologically happening in the real world. And that perpetuates, or at least perpetuates, a stress response all the time. And our bodies go, okay, well, we need to get away from the tiger chasing us. So it goes into these heightened states. And it leads us to becoming iller or unhealthy over time, trying to move us away from that. And it's just our body telling us, listen, you're not doing the right thing. We just tend to forget about it and ignore it and push through it. And then we wonder why we have type 2 diabetes, why we get heart disease. The physical manifestation of a bit of pain locally in the chest can have emotional background, it could have physical background, but we just tend to kind of go, oh, well, I'm sore here, or I'm sore in my arm. It has to be something very local and irritated at the tissue level. But it might stem back from 20 years ago, being in an accident or having an emotional stressor. And we just never really take the time to sit back and listen and just be in tune with ourselves. And most of the time, everyone, when we deal with our patients, they tend to know what's going on with their bodies far better than I could ever work out, even with testing. So you just let people kind of talk, and they'll often know kind of where things stem from. It's just to try and shift that idea of what's going on, that they can deal with this. This is not something that they can't deal with, and start trying to get them to move along on the right track to try and at least change it or vary the environment, chemically, physically, or emotionally, that allows the body to start actually expressing its health again.
Okay, so what would you recommend we do to get our mind out of that stress state, to constantly think and drive the stress state? What can we do so that doesn't happen?
We'll break it again. I'm going to keep going back to this chemical, physical, and emotional load that the system has to go through. So if those are your three filters that you're going to run it through, attached to that, think about toxicity and deficiency versus purity and sufficiency. So the best way I can put it is a mom dealing with her children. We'll talk about how active you are and what you're doing, and they'll say to me, I run around after the kids, I'm physically active, I'm mobile. That's great. So sufficiency is there. You're moving a lot, but it's not for you. You're focused on other things at the same time. You're not doing it for yourself to improve. So purity is down. Now, if you do too much of that, it eventually becomes toxic because you're not moving in the correct way. So that's the way you kind of always in your head try and filter this. If I'm doing this all the time, is this good for me? Is it pure? Am I getting enough of it? Versus, am I not doing enough? Or is it bad for me, being toxic? The emotional level is always there. You're not going to get away from it. So the best way to try and deal with it is, rather than waiting for it to happen to you and we end up being reactive to our environment, you have to go and be proactive to your environment. If you let life happen to you, you're just, the tiger's chasing you all the time. You've done nothing to try and sort yourself out. So you have to sit down and consistently and repetitively put processes and little steps into place where you can be able to down-regulate yourself. So all of this stress talk ultimately drives you to what's called sympathetic arousal, which is just stress. And I'll keep going back to that because we'll talk about vagus nerve with that, because that's the opposite to that. So your stress physiology kicks in. It's designed to get you away from the tiger trying to chase you and eat you. Now, I will use myself as an example where in the mornings when I wake up, I try and do a bit of breath work as soon as I get up in the morning. Your vagus nerve, basically, that's the name after the wandering nerve. It runs from the brain. It's a cranial nerve that exits out your skull, comes through the esophagus, supplies the heart and the lungs, supplies the diaphragm, and supplies all the internal organs. You have no voluntary control of your organs, but you have voluntary control of your diaphragm and you have voluntary control of some of the deeper esophageal muscles, okay? So when you get into this hyper-aroused stress physiology, you shut down vagal tone. That part of the nervous system has to down-regulate to keep you away from the tiger chasing you. Because when your tiger's chasing you, the last thing you want to do is try and digest food, is to try and do high energy intensive procedures, so reproduction, immune response, digestion, absorption, excretion. So it shuts down. So we have to look at little processes that you can try and do to try and drive up that vagal tone as much as you can. Eating is vagal tone, but if you're stressed, that's the last thing you typically want to try and do. And if you're then stress eating, you're not aware of eating. You're not consciously sitting down and going through every bite. You know, it's going to be mindful in what you do. You can't just be somewhere else. So for me, I wake up in the mornings, I'll do 5 minutes worth of basic breath work. And for me now, this is where breath work can get this is Pandora's box. You can open the box and go very deep into that rabbit hole if you really wanted to. But simply just learning how to be connected to your diaphragm again, where you're not using the chest to breathe. You're going back to your diaphragm and making sure that the diaphragm is what's getting the breath to move, and there's very little chest movement with that. I will typically do something like box breathing, where it's a 4 count in, hold for a 4 count, exhale over a 4 count, hold for a 4 count. And that just gets my brain into the state that I can then go through. I do 4 sets of 4 box counts, and then I just sit there and I try and be mindful. So I try and be aware of my toes, be aware of my ankle, where's my knee, and I'll work through joint by joint, just be present with my system. The next step after that, once I've done that, is I have some water, and then I'll do a bit of mobility work. And it's, again, nothing fancy, 5 minutes, just to start getting all my joints and my spine to kind of get regulated and get moving. It preps me for work, but again, it gets me connected and it gets that vagus nerve to start firing up. And in the evening when I get back from work, because you're kind of with people all the time and you're always giving and connecting, I'll go through a bit of a space where I can just have some time to myself, and then I'll do a bit of a 10-minute session. So there again, I'll start with active breath control. And typically there, I give myself permission to even have a doze if I go into that state. It's like my little coffee break in my head for a second just to kind of get going again. But the point is that I can then do that consistently. And then what I do for myself is I try and game it. So every night I have a little checklist that I've had something to drink, I've got a sweat on in some way, I've done some kind of movement, I've had a green shake, and I've done my breathing work. And I try and tick those off, all 4 little points every night. Some days, I get through 3 out of 4. Bad days, I'll get through 2 out of 4. You can't obviously then see it as being a bad thing. So this is also the key thing with stress. We've often used stress as a negative emotion. Stress is good for us. It helps us go further and ahead of ourselves. So there's a lot of research now shows that if you're going through a bit of a heavy patch or something's difficult and you can mentally be aware that you have to go through this, it's good for you, it's going to get you better in the long-term outcome of it, your hormonal levels change. You produce oxytocin, which is your connection hormone, it's your happy hormone. As a mom, when you're breastfeeding, that's what gets dumped down. That's how you connect to your little one. What they've shown is when you're under stress and you produce oxytocin, it actually repairs heart muscle. So we have to step away from the idea that stress is always bad for us. Stress is there. It's going to be there. Accept the idea that it's good for you. Accept the struggle. Struggle is good. We shouldn't make struggle negative. And that straight away changes how the brain repairs from stress. And then you have clear, structured ways of doing it. So by far the most easiest thing for everybody to start with is breath work. Pranayama breathing, so a 4 count, 7 count, 8 count, that has got scientific peer-reviewed evidence. So we've got to be careful when we always talk about opinion and using my opinion. I'll often say to you, this is my opinion versus this is where the fact is. That is fact. It relaxes the central nervous system. Done. So, if I'm having a bad night trying to fall asleep, that's what I'll do as my breath work to help me get back into a sleep state. So breath control and understanding how to use your breath is massively important. The next one off of that you can try and do is cold exposure. Not the greatest thing in winter. Yeah.
The more.
Yeah. So the research is, again, very clear. Appreciate the struggle. That's what it comes down to. So the idea with cold exposure is you need to put yourself into a stress environment and you need to be able to think clearly and rationally through that stress environment to make that nervous system work. And we'll use a phrase of cells that fire together, wire together. So if you jump into a cold pool, everyone goes, and they get this big, it's a mammalian reflex response that we have. But what you want to try and do is gently and controllably, if you're at the end of your shower, even if it's only for 20 seconds, drop the temperature a little bit. It doesn't have to be ice cold, but colder. And you start training your nervous system to be able to work through that sudden shock or that stressor. And that starts to drive vagal tone upwards again. And you become good at doing that where, look, if I'm in a bad mood and not in a good place, I won't go and do that. I get antsy, I get irritable. What's the point? You've achieved nothing from that. So you've also got to be not too rigid with these things. You've got to look into the day and play around what you need to kind of do. But cold exposure works like an absolute charm. And then leading to that, you've got things like singing. So and humming, singing in the car, you get those deep esophageal muscles to work, or gargling is a fantastic way that you can take voluntary control of that vagus nerve and you make it get used to firing up. And the key to all of this is, so it's all good and well doing it in a healthy, relaxed, calm space, is that when the stuff hits the fan, you can go back and access that, and you can do it now subconsciously. Initially you start with conscious competence and you have to be aware about it, but when you've done it enough times and you've built a good neurological hardwired pattern, you can do it subconsciously competent, and you can just start going through breath control as someone starts to annoy you or as you're sitting in the traffic. And that's the reality of it. It's the small things. You do it then, straight away, those small things. When the big bad stuff hits you, you can do it even better. And those are the easiest places to kind of start. Breath control, cold exposure, and just a bit of a singing and humming is really, really good. Movement is also fantastic. So we have more than enough evidence to prove that yoga has an impact on vagal tone. So, and if we're looking at performance literature at elite level athletes and the military, to keep people performing at high levels for long periods of time, sleep is the most important. Then comes hydration and nutrition. You've got to be able to feed your brain, and then movement. Yoga, Pilates, Tai Chi, all of those kind of movement patterns, you have to be mindfully aware about what you're doing in space. If you're not really in the practice out of it. And it's fantastic at driving that vagal tone. And that's a big thing with people. It's trying to get them to understand that, you're sitting doing nothing for that 5 minutes while you're waiting for someone. It's a perfect time just to stop, connect with yourself, be mindful. You can wiggle your toes, you can feel that toe in the shoe as it's moving, what your sock feels around it. Simple little things like that, but consistently and repetitively keeps that system down-regulated. And unfortunately, our environment is incredibly loaded at the moment. And if we don't do these things at the moment, we then wonder why we get anxious or a little bit ratty. And that's the best way to look at it. Talk to your partner. Your partner will often say to you, you're being ratty, or you're a little bit more annoyed, or your sleep patterns are a bit haywire. You haven't been able to maintain a homeostatic environment for your nervous system. And your body is doing what it needs to do to keep you alive and to keep you safe. And you're expressing that. But you can voluntarily take the time, do a bit of breathing, do a bit of movement, combine the two together, even better, synergistic. And that helps to try and buffer. And what it actually does at a brain level, you're more tolerant of irritation. So I'll joke with everyone, you can take a bit more abuse. Your buffer to tolerate irritation and reaction is much, much better. And you don't just snap or react to the environment. And you're more proactive to your environment.
What happens to us when we go into that state when we're like, ah, and just lose it? Like, what happens in our body in that moment? Are we frying our circuits?
So we forget, again, we tend to think we're better than what we are. So we have to still realize we're animals. And what's taking over is our base of our brain, our reptilian brain, kicks in, and it's going, right, fight or flight. You as a mom, you're going to protect your babies. So if something comes after you, you're either going to kill it, or you're going to take your babies and you're going to run away. And that's physiologically what's happening. All the blood flow, basically it's shunted from the front part of your brain, where you can think clearly, logically, and rationally, and it gets pushed to the back of the head. And now you no longer run yourself. That part of your older brain, that's an animal part of the brain, it literally looks like a lizard's brain, if we had to dissect it. It takes over and it runs you. So you've lost that high connection of being a spiritual being, of being a human being, and you've regressed to a more animalistic base level, and it's running you. So you go through fight or flight, and then ultimately, if it goes for too long, you're going to freeze. And that's when you'll see animals act dead. Or for us, people just don't know what to do. They get stuck on the spot, they can't think logically what's going on, and they just shut down. And again, it's our brain running us. So as you go through the fight and flight response, digestion stops, absorption stops, excretion stops, your immune system, which currently at the moment, that's what we will talk about, shuts down. You cannot use those high energy processes to get your body healthy again. And that's what our body is driving through. The problem is we're not aware of it at the low grade level. We're aware of it when we kind of react and we get all the emotional outbursts and we get all antsy, but that's happening constantly all the time through the day. But that low grade level just pulls energy, and that's what sets up this low grade inflammation, and that in time, over years, is what sets up the type 2 diabetes, all the things we die of nowadays, the heart disease, etc.
Back pain. Everything comes down to this emotional state. And I guess this is the thing, is some people are like, oh, I eat my 5 fruits a day, 5 fruits and vegetables, I'm healthy. But they don't realize, but your thoughts are not. And that all these layers of our being needs to work together and then be in harmony for us to be a fully functional human. So you can eat fruit all day, but if you're in a bad state of thinking and you're stuck in that program of thinking, then your life won't change or your health won't change.
Yeah. And I don't sound like a broken record because it's something we keep going on about. And we're such instant gratification, and we tend to think as human beings we have all the answers. So exactly that. I'm going to take my supplements and my vitamins, and I can take care of this one little box. And again, we'll come back to an ecology example. You know, you can give the plant sunlight, you can give it water, but if it's sitting in horrible clay soil, nothing happens. Mm. So that whole ecosystem has to be nurtured in order to get, and particularly the wording is important. At a cell level, you're either in a state of thriving or in a state of down-regulation, death. That cell is moving towards a dead state or it's moving to a healthy state. Mm. There's nothing in between. And we tend to kind of be too localized in the moment sometimes of just kind of going, well, I'm going to go do a bit of exercise, but I can go and have my whiskey later tonight or go and do everything else and be excessive in other things and not be able to kind of keep that moderation in control and not take care of it. And then we wonder why, well, I'm not losing weight. And again, we put it to those little things about, oh, why am I not losing weight? But the bigger picture is your system is not in a state of being healthy. It's stressed because if you feed me, I'm going to take whatever you feed me, I'm going to hold on to it because I don't know where my next meal is going to come from. And then we wonder why we then have pain, inflammation, why our weight is not shifting. We're just not expressing a state of health because we've done one or two things that we think is fine for us, but we haven't really listened and kind of gone, okay, well, I know that's not working. What do I do around that to sort of make that work better?
Yeah, we have to shift how we think. Even if it's just 1 degree, you're going to end up in a totally different direction. Yeah.
And it comes to trajectory. You know, I think a lot of people kind of go, oh, today I did all this and all this and all this, which is great for today. But if you don't sustain that trajectory, it doesn't really matter what you're doing right now. The trajectory is really what's going to determine where you're going to end up in 20 years' time. And unfortunately with health, it's much like savings and investments and all the rest of it from a financial point of view. It's not something we think about now. It's something that only happens to us later, so I'll put that off for later. And especially when individuals get to like that 40-year age group, you know, you've got kids to deal with, you've got work to deal with, life gets in the way. So it's easy just not to move and to not do those little basic things that you normally would do. And then suddenly people wake up at 60 and they kind of go, well, why can't I jog? Why am I feeling like an old person at 55 and I'm stiff and I'm rigid and I'm not thriving? And unfortunately, it's all those little things over time that just builds up and builds up and builds up and have now led to this end product. Thankfully, our systems are really dynamic and really resilient. So again, you just start to look after that ecosystem again, and you start feeding the soil, you start giving it sunlight, you start doing the basics back in again, that system will start to self-correct. Our body wants to stay in a state of health. It doesn't want to express disease. It's always moving to try and keep us healthy, and we just need to allow that to happen.
That's the thing, like change can happen. You're not stuck in freeze. You're not stuck in toxicity. You're not stuck in a negative thinking pattern. You can change that. Yes.
And
I feel.
yeah. No, so that negative thinking pattern, and that's why, the physical side of it we can easily deal with. Don't move. And what I love about the physical side, and that's why movement is the most important thing, I think, to begin with, because it's typically for free. Go for a walk at basic level. It's something that if we look at in terms of cost value, it's not something that's taking that much value or that much cost to go and move. A basic class, walking, just going for a walk around the block, costs anyone nothing. Chemical, not something to kind of deal with. You can look at the foods you eat. You can choose where you naturally choose to get your products from or what you choose to put in your body. Again, that's under your control. The mental side of it is difficult. And that's the whole point, because it's constantly barraging you what your system's doing. So being able to sit and listen to yourself and kind of go, emotions are 30 seconds of chemical storms going on in our brain that brings on the anger or the guilt or the frustration. But what we then tend to do is just feed that. And then that's what sets up this perpetual state of, I'm just anxious, or I'm stressed, or I'm wired, whatever the variation might be. But if you took a couple seconds to just sit with that emotion, and emotionally try and upskill yourself, try and go, am I feeling anger? Or is this maybe guilt? Or is it maybe just being frustrated? And you can look at that and process that. It's not to say you're going to suddenly make yourself better, but your physiology changes around that. And it doesn't become then a belief system, because then that's what feeds that back to us all the time, is that, well, I'm not really worthy of feeling good for myself because I feel frustrated or I feel guilty all the time. And it perpetuates that system. And again, cells that fire together wire together. It works the other way around. You become your normal now. And to try and shift that normal needs some consistent work, repetitively and consistently, to get that baseline to kick in.
Cool. I see there on your clock, I'm so happy that it's at the back there, that we're like halfway through already, so we should probably move on to the yoga questions. And Santam's just asking, what's the detriment of poor body alignment on the nervous system?
So, multiple systems. If you're not aligned, your nervous system cannot express its full capacity. So, in a nutshell, you're not going to have good function. What it comes down to is, and this is something that why it's so important to be mindful of movement. Every joint in your body is a series of receptors that tells the brain where you are in space. So if that joint is in a state of poor function, so it doesn't have to be that it's stuck or it's stiff, but if you're not being able to go through a full range of motion, you're creating abnormal feedback to your brain. So the best way I'll describe it is garbage in, garbage out. So if that joint is now not going through a full range of motion, your brain is expressing a state of stress. And it's going to go, I need to protect that area. So you start to stiffen up your back muscles to say, let me keep that safe. I don't want you doing anything to irritate me or harm me. Now, that's what's great about what yoga does. And it's clear we want to make this. Now, if you stretch, it's passive, okay? What's great with yoga and your movement patterns is its mobility. It's taking the joint through an active range of motion. If you go through a squat, if you go through a warrior, if you go through triangle, you have to think about how much of that motion of the joint you can generate and create stability on your own. That is far better for joint function and for tissue health than just passively stretching a joint out. There's a place for stretching, but mobility encompasses so much more. So if that muscle is dysfunctional, if the joint is not doing its job properly, what it's going to do is it's going to create abnormal neural tension. And when a nerve is slightly tight or being pulled, it becomes hyperexcitable. It fires up too much. And that then starts up muscle tension. It starts generating pain cycles. It starts generating inflammatory cycles. and we start to get this kind of evolving loop that kicks in a little bit. So I'm not going to say that the alignment is the only answer, but what we'll use as a way to access the system is getting those joints as mechanically mobile as possible, creating less pull on the brainstem, on the spinal cord, on the brachial plexus and the sciatic nerve, to allow that nervous system to engage and fire up. And that's critically where it comes down to in a nutshell.
Okay, so what kind of yoga injuries do you often see? I guess we're overstretching in many of the styles of yoga.
So,
is that we pull on those nerves too much because we want to, let's say, my hamstrings are tight, and then we like stretch that back of the leg to make it longer, but what we don't realize then is we're probably pulling on that nerve that is then making the muscle tighter, and then we're like, oh, I've been folding forward for 200 years, but I'm still not touching the floor. But meanwhile, it's because we're overdoing it.
So that's exactly it. It's an overcompensation. And tissues being tight or muscles being tight is not because the muscle's tight. So you'll get those people that often come in saying, I can stretch, I can stretch, and I can stretch, and my hamstrings are still tight. That tension is where your brain is creating tone in the muscle to keep it protected. So there's a reason for that brain to do that. So what we have to sometimes just sit down with ourselves and listen to ourselves and kind of going, well, I can push through the stretch, but it's done nothing for me before. Let's shift tack a little bit here and look at something that I can try and do because my brain's creating some kind of control through my hamstring, my glutes. And that's typically where you want to look at potentially more of your upper back or a bit more diaphragmatic engagement. I don't want to call it core because that's a bit of a, it encompasses too many things that's not really realistic. Then you'll start to see your hamstrings shift straight away. So stretch potentially and overstretching, because people also have this idea of, they sit in the class and the ego kicks in a bit and they kind of go, oh, I need to achieve that, because that person can do it. And then they push themselves a little bit too hard, rather than just being there for themselves, for what they need at that moment in time. That's definitely one portion. The other portion of it too is most people aren't in tune with their bodies. So primarily for most injuries, for anything, whether it's yoga or normal sport, is that they just don't know what feels normal. They don't have any idea of where they are in space. So they suddenly think, and again, that human's nature of, I need to achieve this today, and I must go to a full inverted headstand within 2 weeks, and then they push themselves too hard, and then they just cannot tolerate the tissue load. Exactly. And those are often the people that are clumsy. They just don't know quite where they are in space. So where yoga is fantastic is when we do rehab, we make things about a single plane, which is fine for that very, 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 very early stage initial rehab. But we don't move in single planes in the real world. We move in 3 dimensions, which is what yoga does a fantastic job of facilitating. So they want to go through safe movement, because this is the whole thing. Your brain is anticipating a threat. So it's to listen to that threat and kind of go, okay, well, I'm thinking that I must be tight through my hamstring. What can I do to work through that safely, that I'm not under threat? You get the brain out of that threat response, and you're able to then start to work better through that. And then with that, if you're intelligently aware of where am I in space, how am I moving, it's not just like going from A to B, is my wrist in the right position to my shoulder? Which then you engage in that joint position sense. And you're training your brain as much as you're training the tissue. And I think that's sometimes where, and it happened for me when I do my normal training or if I do a bit of movement work, you're so focused on that outcome as opposed to being present about what you should be doing in the moment. I mean, that's what you guys teach all the time. But I think, again, with human nature, we live in an environment that's a bit, get it done, be as perfect as you can. And you're not really that aware. So that's typically what set up most of the injuries in yoga that I tend to see. It's just that, okay, let me push. I need to achieve whatever I need to achieve, and we take load.
Yes, it's so funny. It's like yoga is all about being present and in the moment and in the body. Yet we seem to use that time to think, and I don't know. It takes many years to get to that point where you realize it's not really about the body. It's where I place my mind in my body. That's what it's about. Not about achieving this.
Yeah. So something for me, what I've noticed the last 2 years is, when you're younger, you're very much, it's objective outcomes. I must be able to go and do this in the gym, or I must be able to go and touch my toes in a forward bent position. And I'll be very focused on the outcome. And as I've gotten older, I've started understanding and appreciating the more subjective, nuanced of, well, it's all been a while I can go and try and touch the ground, but is my pelvis at a neutral position? Is my heels as flat as they can be? Can I get a little bit more pull on the one heel down to get a bit more stretch down my sciatic nerve? So that emotional maturity, which I suppose, and it comes down to your guys' years of training, you know, you realize that it takes a while just to get to that level. And I think that's something that all of us, as we go through the process of learning anything, it's just to step back a little bit and kind of go, this is not that I need to be perfect now. This is that I need to be here and take the first 10 minutes of the class and go, can I be as good as I can be in the moment? And then we can maybe allow ourselves to kind of push a little bit harder. But that way you learn the brain capacity to stay focused and stay mentally aware about what you need to try and achieve as you go from there.
So what other parts of the body do you see the yogis injure, other than the hamstrings we overstretch? Like where else are we not so fully awake?
So that's what we'll tend to see some people is they try and push their headstands, or they try and do the inversions sometimes too quickly. And what it comes down to, it's not that they are mechanically stressing their necks by falling over or something like that. It's that in our modern day environment, we're exposed to screens all the time, and we just start to collapse forward. And we don't have the tissue tone to regulate that. Also, our neck structure, the muscles and the bone, is not as, what's the word I would use, is not as resilient as what it was in previous generations, because we don't load these enough. So, like if you have to do inversions, it's to try and get people used to putting load gently onto their necks, and their tissues can get stronger, and that the bones can actually thicken. So you create a stress onto the tissue, and the body adapts to that stress. That's a healthy, resilient system. So if we had to do an X-ray almost, we'd see that that bone would be thicker within someone like you compared to someone that's a newbie. We definitely see structural changes in their bone health than what you wouldn't see. So it's just, when someone just wrote there, it's just managing the load. It's being realistic and going, okay, this is not something I need to do today. This is something that over the next 6 weeks, bone remodeling will happen in 6 weeks. So we kind of say to people, right, if you want to get that bone injury or bone stress to get better, 6 weeks gradually loading that bone all the time will make the tissue much better. So upper back and shoulders and lats are a big issue that we'll see in yogis, because again, even though you guys are training, so let's put like this, someone like you. You're a lot more physically mobile than, say, one of your students, because that's what you do all day. But you still have to do screen time of some sort. And it will load up if your pecs are too tight, and that the shoulders internally rotate, and these deep muscles in the neck here become shorter and tighter, and it drives this forward. Okay? So even people that are active and mobile, we focus on try and get those lats engaged, try and get that scapula. So it's not about just rotating cuff, because everyone loves to talk about that, but get your scapula and your shoulder blades that you know where they are in space, and you can activate them as you need to. And that will make a huge difference at counteracting any loads in the front of the body. So going through your vinyasa kind of flow as you come up, you're not just squeezing through your shoulder blades, you're actually being able to hold that and get the movement to move through that. And that is a huge one that can make a massive difference both in your yoga practice, but also then in the real world, day-to-day, driving in your car, etc.
Cool.
And then pelvic floor. So as a woman, for you guys, pelvis, it's a system. So this is, I'm always careful about trying to make it too simplified about, oh, it's just your pelvis or just the coccyx or just the sacrum. They work as an ecosystem. So post-pregnancy patients or post-pregnancy women, and even younger girls tend to land on their bums quite often when they're growing up. I don't know kind of what happens, and we tend to see a lot more coccyx, sacrum, pelvis issues. So as we start doing physical training or some mobility, pelvis, pelvic floor integration is not as effective as it can be. And again, it's something that isn't really spoken about often in the general public conversation about, you know, do you do your Kegel? So there's so many variations of that, but are you aware of what your pelvic floor should be able to do? Are you aware of your breath in both practice as well as general day-to-day activities? And again, increasing that level of awareness of those areas is a massive way of creating more stability and central control, which will then make your yoga practice far more effective and far more resilient.
So just coming back to the pelvis, I've had teachers teach me different things. So in some styles, we have to draw the pelvic floor up the whole time. It's called the mula bandha. And then in other styles, we're encouraged to not do that at all, to relax the belly. And the teacher will say, but as you move your legs, that you're naturally engaging your pelvic floor. And in some people that always lift, that causes stress, it brings on that stress state. Now, what's your opinion about it? How do you feel about that?
So, taking away philosophy, we look at what we're designed to do. Again, I'm going to jump back to the evolutionary side of it. You know, we're designed to be upright and mobile. So, rather than talking about core, think about your pelvis. I don't have one in my room, but you've got your pelvis. The pelvic floor is the base of that. Your diaphragm is the top of that, and then all the trunk stabilizers. So your core, your obliques, your back muscles, when they work together, they create this pressurized cylinder. When you can get this pressurized cylinder to engage, you've now got a foundation to move your arms off of, to move your hips off of. So ball and sockets for your shoulders and your hips, these are the engines of movement for your limbs. If they have nothing solid to work from, that's where we start to use all these other muscles to try and create stability, and that's why we pick up injuries. So technically, if you're doing any movement, that pelvic floor should have a degree of engagement. So it comes down to, I suppose, in the language, how much engagement you feel that you need to have to make sure that you adequately control. So I can't say that necessarily they're right and they're wrong, because every time you do something, you should be engaging pelvic floor. It might be a question then of, do you need to really engage it to be aware of it? Or can you make sure that you have subconscious, you're skillful enough that you have subconscious mastery of that already, and it can then do the job as it is? Because it's not, it has to work all the time. It is not ever not engaged.
Okay.
So it's not a straightforward tense it up or don't tense it up. It's always working. It's always there.
Yes.
How much awareness do you have of it? And how much can you influence it under your own willful control?
Okay. Yeah, I guess doing Kegel exercises is good, but if you did it all the time, it might be too much.
And again, it comes back to normal living. You know, there's two ends of the spectrum. There's doing nothing, there's doing too much, and then typically most good things happen in moderation. So, you know, and we'll take it back to gym. If you just do one movement all the time, you're missing all the other stuff. So you have to be able to know that you can actively recruit your pelvic floor, but you can't think about it all the time. You've got to be able to do other things on top of that and make it work as part of a system to give you the result that you want. Again, the holistic approach, modern day environment makes things too simplistic. It's reductionist. So it kind of goes, okay, well, we need to focus only on that one thing like the pelvic floor. But in order for that to work, your connection between the brain has to work. Your input from that tissue to the brain to tell it, oh, it needs to tighten up. To make sure the diaphragm can engage so that it's got something to contract against is so, so important.
Yeah, because those two work together. So don't even worry about your pelvic floor if you're not breathing properly. If your diaphragm isn't moving, then what's the point of engaging the bottom? Okay.
And so that would work for the average person. Obviously, if someone's got an injury or something pathological with their pelvic floor, it gets a little bit different. And then there can be a bit more specialized focus towards that. But that would then get dealt with. But again, and I'll say to even those kind of people, you know, they get so focused on just dealing with that one part of it, they forget about the other parts that go with it too. So it's being able to just step back every now and then and kind of go, okay, I've got this thing to focus on, but I've completely forgotten about all these other things around that. Let me come back to that a bit as well, and just keep myself consistently and again present with what I need to be doing around that.
Yeah. Okay. So just coming back again to the yoga injuries. How are knees? Knees is also something that you see often. And is that maybe we're out on our feet or our hips? Because whenever I have a knee injury, it's always because it's somewhere else. It's not the issue is at my knee.
So again, in the average person, the knee is just a hinge. It only goes one direction, okay? Whereas your shoulder, your hips go in multi-direction. So typically, unless it's like someone that's been, and again in yoga practice, you're not going to be doing anything that just suddenly blows out an ACL. And one thing I should mention, especially if we are talking within a yoga group and the predominantly a bit more women, at the time of menstruation, your estrogen levels do go up. So we see more knee injuries or ACL injuries because there's more inflammation to that ligament than any other time for female athletes. Okay, so that's something that often doesn't get spoken about. In your luteal phase or your follicular phase, depending where your estrogen and your progesterone is, it's going to have different impacts on your muscle system and your inflammatory system. So we do know one thing, that if you are prone to lots of inflammation and your knees have given you issues before in the past, typically at 3 days at the time of menstruation, you probably shouldn't be putting too much stress on your knees just to protect them first, okay? Then, unless you fall over and you bang your knee and there's a physical trauma, which shouldn't be happening typically in yoga, knee is not an issue. The rest of it comes down to typically bum, probably about bum 80% of the time, and then your ankle maybe the other 20% of the time. So most people, the fastest degenerated joint in the body is the inside of the knee, because we tend to get bum amnesia, gluteal amnesia. We sit so much that our bums don't engage and they don't work. So if you stand up or you're doing any one-leg balance work, that upper thigh rotates inwards and it puts stress on the inside portion of that knee. The lower limb also turns inwards and it flattens our foot, our arch. So often people come and go, build up your arch, or go put orthotics in. And again, we're talking about the general population now. You get your bum stronger and you make your upper glutes work better. It suddenly corrects, gets that femur to work properly. You don't put any load on the inside portion of the knee. It doesn't degenerate. But again, we're not often enough loading up that glute gradually and consistently to make it work properly.
So, yeah, lazy bums is what it comes down to.
And again, being aware, so when you're doing one leg work, yes, balance is important, but are you, so in the extreme version of this, if we're dealing with powerlifters, when they've got a big heavy load on their back, we teach them to imagine pushing into the ground and corkscrewing their foot outwards. They won't physically corkscrew the foot outwards, but they're driving that movement and you'll feel your glutes engage. So you activate your glutes. So you're making yourself mechanically aware that you've got good bum control. Then you can go through your movement pattern and you'll have better engagement as opposed to just going, can I get to tree pose and just hold the tree pose. And again, as a teacher, you'll understand, and that's why that technical skill progression is so important. People in the beginning when they're learning it, they just want to go from here to here and it must look pretty. But there's a reason why you guys go through technical skill progression, so that you can get engagement, you can get firing up patterns, because it builds up control all the way through it.
Yes. So what would you say as advice to people with flat feet then in their yoga practice? So I've been thinking this week a lot about using my feet to pull the mat apart. And I feel that really gets me in my glutes. And if I pull my feet towards each other, it does something different, then there's more of a pelvic core.
Yeah, you start to get your, it gets your adductors to fire. So
and
that's
I guess there's somewhere in the middle where you get both.
So
what cue-wise for our yoga teachers, what is better cue to use? Pulling the mat apart with the feet, will that get us to engage our glutes?
Our adductors tend to, so again, if our modern day environments, we tend to fold forward here and go forward here. And then our legs fold inwards and we collapse forward here. So our adductors tend to overwork. They're very easy to do the workload. Whereas our glutes, as soon as the adductor's engaged, the glute has to switch off. It's the counter opposite. So what we need to be focusing on is how do we make those glutes work more? It's easy to get our adductors to work. So your cue would be to keep trying to stretch that mat apart.
Okay. And then for people like with flat feet, because I know that there's a cue and they say lift the arches of your foot. But I don't think it's, so another teacher, what I've learned, what I teach my students is that it doesn't matter how high the arch is. That doesn't say how healthy the foot is. It's about how we transfer the weight and if there's a spiral that happens. So even if the foot is flat, it can still be a healthy foot. No? Yes?
And again, exactly. We in a modern environment, we get so reductionist that if you see a slight variation, you got flat feet, lo and behold, it's bad for you. A foot is a beautiful thing. I mean, the way it works and the way it's designed to work. And we have such variation in our physiology. So if you have that person that looks like they've got a flat foot, but that there's a little bit of an arch that they can still engage, that could be their normal. And that's where they could work and thrive from, as opposed to someone that could be completely much higher, and then we go, oh, well, you've got too much of an arch. It's finding where your natural position needs to be. Now, realistically, it takes a lot of years to go and find that. But, you know, again, if you're looking at your one leg work and that and getting glutes to engage, glute engagement, and then learning people to get comfortable with using their toes and their feet. You know, people train everything, but no one trains their feet. They don't actively spread their toes. They can't grip. We spend all day on our feet. It's a body part that no one actively engages. There's a simple thing to just...
If the roof is collapsing, you need to fix the foundation. You need to fix your feet. If your alignment is out, it's probably need to start with your feet.
And people make things so overly simplified, but we sit there and kind of go, it's all there in our face. It's an easy truth to forget about. And, you know, to sit there and do little toe exercises and do spreads or lift toe. And again, it's that whole thing like, can you lift your big toe up? Can you lift the other toes up? A lot of people struggle mentally because they just don't have the brain connection anymore. And then as we get older, we're like, oh, that's too much hard work to do. But as a child, you have so much fun playing around and doing it.
Okay, I'm worried that Instagram is going to cut us off because exactly on 1 hour it just cuts. There's no warning. So we should talk about the C virus. I don't want to get censored, so I'm not going to say the full word. But what advice do you have for us, maybe specifically to that? I know we've been talking about a lot about wellness, but just to bring it all together, like, yes, we can do the box breathing. Yes, we need to eat healthy. We need to move. But specifically with the virus, is there something that we can do to help our lungs specifically, maybe?
The most efficient low-hanging fruit is vitamin D. Okay, so we have enough papers and scientific peer-reviewed evidence to say, when they've looked at Europe particularly, a large number of the cases they've found associated with that, there's been low vitamin D levels. Now, we haven't been able to look at necessarily Southeast Asia and what's happening in South America, but this comes out of Europe. Make sure that at a simple level, so it doesn't have to be that you're always getting vitamin D supplementation, but if you can make sure that you get some quality time in the sun. Now again, we sit in our cars, all our cars' windows are tinted. You know, if we sit in our houses and we have tinted windows, you're not really getting sun exposure, but you're filtering out all that UVA and UVB light. So it's being responsible about your sunlight exposure, but that has a huge, profound difference at boosting that immune function. And again, when they look at the numbers, a huge number of infections all have reduced or compromised vitamin D levels. That is critical. And then on top of that, and again, you know, there's always been this discussion about the industrial way of doing things with medication and all the rest of it. We have a lot of the control for ourselves. You know, I think people have to realize, though, that, you know, if you're in this fight or flight state, and it is a stressful and anxious period of time, but be aware that is going to compromise you. Put steps into place to kind of, how do I manage my mental state better? Am I eating as well as I can? Am I moving as well as I can? So, sleep. If your brain is not getting sleep, you're not clearing it from all the metabolites from the day's activity, so just thinking and all the rest of it. Your immune system, which is controlled by your brain, is now compromised straight away. So now sleep is a very big, dark animal if you do struggle with sleep. So it's not just a matter of going, can I build more hours? But then what you look at, if you are struggling with sleep, look at your quality of sleep. If I'm only getting 4 hours or 3 hours a day, can I make those 3 hours as good a quality as possible? And there's various ways of trying to get your brain into the right state to do that. But that's the first place to start with. When the quality improves, the quantity will get better at some point. But getting your sleep right and getting some vitamin D from the sun, you know, and again, relatively cost effective. The sun is for free, it's there. Getting sleep is just putting things into place to do that. That will have a huge impact on how your body expresses this idea of what's going on with the world around it and how it reacts to that environmental load potentially that it gets.
Easy peasy, right? Oh, 28 seconds remaining. Okay, quickly remind us your address.
So I'm down in 128 Edison Crescent down the road in Sunninghill. That's it.
And the website?
Oh, bodyworks.co.za, and it's under Bodyworks Kairos for Instagram.
Okay, I'm going to comment it again below when it cuts in a few seconds. Thank you so much.